Hey folks, it's middle of the night. It's actually, I guess, technically speaking, July the 5th. Um, I would have said, maybe if I had put up a video yesterday, like Happy Independence Day. But I'm in the spot that I'm in. I parked outside this old, well, it's not an old, it's parked outside this can I keep my lights on or not? Parked outside this park near my parents' house, and so I couldn't get much sleep last night. I finally got to sleep around, like, I think 4 or 5. It's been the typical case here. Some of it's because some nights I'll be out at a coffee house and I'll get some coffee, and they make pretty strong espressos, so it's like some of it's the caffeine, but excuse me, even without that, it's just the effect that what's going on right now is having on me. And I like the fact that there's at least a place out here that's not too far from the house, but is kind of in the middle of nowhere that I can kind of drive out to and park out at, even though it kind of gets a bit creepy at night. But obviously I wouldn't get out of the car out here at this point in the night. But if it's not the caffeine, then I'm just not able to sleep because of what's happening with my mom. And I put up the last video, and at this point, it's honestly a matter of time. From what everything, all the facts are staring us in the face. I don't know if I really want to go into how far the cancer spread, where it spread. I think I tried to relate that last time, and obviously it's gotten even worse since then. I mean, this is terminal at this point, and part of me wants to sort of rage about it, like, hey, why didn't my family just go get her treatment, starting off in May when she still had a decent amount of strength to her, and she could have at least gone through maybe a session or so. Why didn't they do that? Why did they wait? Why, when I was here, doing all this runaround for like a month and a half, getting like the appointment set up, getting records sent over, getting all these things taken care of, getting these images sent over to thus and such place, and firing that with the hospital administration, and going through all the wrangling that you go through when you suddenly find out your mom has cancer, your dad has cancer, or somebody in your family has cancer, and you got to try and get the right information to the right people so they can put together a treatment plan. And you go through the ups and downs, and the hope and the despair, and like I feel like it was all just like, it was like a charade. It was this game. It was all for appearances. It was like I kind of myself, I feel a bit used, to put it lightly. But the biggest thing is I just kind of feel like it was this huge circus that my family put on, and nothing was actually going to happen good. My mom was going to eventually die, sooner rather than later, and it was sort of like the conclusion of her whole story arc and her life, and all the substance abuse and the narcissistic abuse, and that peppered in with actual genuine love and familial connection, and just the moments I've had to experience where, like, seeing her just so emaciated and tired, and it's like the last 6 or 7 months apparently she's been sober from alcohol, and she was actually starting to turn around and have that sort of motherly relationship with myself and my sister, and wanting me to be there, not so I could go and do stuff for her, but because she wanted to be with me and create memories and have a relationship, the way we coulda, woulda, shoulda. And this comes along and just cuts it short, and it just kind of feels like being jerked around, whether it's by fate, fortune, God, my family, what have you, or some combination thereof. It just kind of feels like being jerked around and given this sort of false sense of like hope of, like, oh, she's, she almost, died from the double pneumonia, and she saw the light, and now she's, wanting to change. She's trying to make this effort, and, finally we're coming around to something, and then this, shows up, and it's like, it's taking her from us. And, she had said to my dad when she got the diagnosis, I don't want to leave you guys, but, it's kind of like one of those things about life where, you don't get to decide on that, really. There are things you can do to sort of like buy yourself more time, or make the time that you're destined to have, more fruitful, so you actually like create something out of it and leave something behind of a legacy, and a mark that says, this person was here. But once it gets to that point, like it's at that point, and once, like the angel of death shows up, the Grim Reaper, whatever you want to refer to him as, to collect his due, to collect that soul, like there's no turning back at that point. And as much as I sound like I've accepted, I haven't fully. I mean, I remember the last time I saw my mom when she was actually cognizant, and it was right after we'd gone to this appointment at this, National Cancer Institute, Center of Excellence, cancer care, place, place I've been recognized by the NCI, and basically been told that, they really couldn't do anything because of how weak my mom already was at that point. And got her back. I was like crying the whole time, like I on the ride back in particular, because we went there, we had this sense of hope, like finally, she's strong enough, we can get her in, and we can get the ball rolling. And then I'd be told basically they couldn't really do much, that the doctor didn't want to chance it because if he gave her this stuff, it would shorten her life and this, that, and the other. And it's like I mean, her life was going to be shortened either way, and crying on the way back, and then getting her out of there and having to try and sort of be as congenial with the folks who were doing the transportation, who they had their hands full, and they did their best job, and they were nice about things. I'm not gonna rag on them because they did their job. But getting her back, and then taking her in the wheelchair, and she had to have an oxygen tank hooked up with this tube to her, her nostrils, and then having to bring that along. And we get to her room, and then now I have to try and lift her out of there because she's just so weak. She couldn't get herself out of the wheelchair, and had to lift her out and try and carry her as best as I can, and try and place her down the bed, and happened to be on her, the side that she had a broken hip on, because, in the midst of all this, one of our dogs, one of the dogs who always follows her around, had to go and like trip her up in her walker at the home. It's a few weeks back at this point, but the few weeks back is when she had the fall, and then having to lay her down in the bed and try and help her, sleep, and then just like crying over her, and she has her arms wrapped around me, and I got my arms wrapped around her, and I'm not able to like say to her like, things are gonna be okay, Mom. We're gonna find a way. This is gonna work. We got a plan, and it's like we didn't have a plan. And I think that's kind of that expression, "we didn't have a plan," like has sort of defined the last, I don't know, 20 years or so. And the we could include myself, or could include my father, my sister, my mother, some combination thereof. We didn't have a plan. We didn't have a plan. And, it's almost like only after I left my family back in 2015 and moved, 500 miles away, that I was actually able to get a plan, but only for my life, because I couldn't, change them and their ways of doing things. And it's just led up to this. And now, she's in the ICU. She's actually been in there for longer than they said she was going to be. It's ironic. Like they said, she's not going to make it through the night when she was initially moved in there, and now it's been a few days, and you don't know. I mean, my dad is still struggling with accepting things, and my sister like is trying to mediate between my dad and I, but at the same time, like And I don't know where my sister kind of gets this sort of like, I mean, maybe it says that my sister's at a loss for words, and she's trying to communicate, but she doesn't know like exactly how to put it any other way that doesn't come off as at times as condescending, or now you're gonna have to listen, and now the thing you need to understand is that this is his wife of 40, and something, it's actually like 41 years they've been married, which is pretty long, pretty damn long. It's an exception to the rule for this day and age. But they'll get the numbers off, and then their tone and all that. It's probably just, this is just the situation, and she's struggling to hold it together, struggling to grieve herself, because she said things like, my mom's not gonna, and because she, you can only speak for yourself, so you say my mom when it's our mom, it's perfectly understandable to use that kind of language, because I'll say my mom this and that, my dad this and that, but she'll be like, my mom is not gonna, basically, that my mom is not gonna be there for, once I'm married, and have the kids, she's not gonna be there to, teach me how to swaddle, my kids, or her would be her grandkids. She's not gonna be there to teach me that, and that's what she, being the mother and then the grandmother, they would, that's what they would do, and she's not gonna be there to do that, and it's kind of like that's, she's having to grieve the fact that she's never gonna be able to share that with her mom, and she put it to me, it was, that, yeah, our mom has been sober for these last 6, 7 months, and she was starting to really change around, and it was like things are starting to get better, and then, the cancer shows up, and it's just like, it's like being like toyed with, by some sort of, I don't know, some sort of force or something, where, you're kind of being told like, oh, this is what you could have had, whatever, and it's just like, I don't know, there's all these whys, the questions that will never be answered. And, the truth is that, I guess this is how a lot of life is. And, I wish my folks had realized that sort of stuff a long time ago. Cause like, my dad's struggling with accepting this. He's, like as I pointed out to my sister, and she agreed that, we each have our sort of, our struggle, our individual struggle, that we're grieving different things, in different ways. And we have, it's like the expression, men and women are not the same, they're different. And it's not that one is greater or lesser than the other. It's just that they're different. And, her experience of this is from the perspective of being the daughter. My experience is from being the son. My dad's from being, my mother's husband, my father, that they had, as kids and all that. And, there have been moments just over the last, like, and it feels weird that it's only been like, about a month and a half that all this has gone down, because I mean, there have been these moments where I've had conversations with my mom back when she could speak, and with my dad and with my sister, which is sort of like stuff I wish we talked about these things so long before, and things my mom has said where she's sort of been facing her own mortality when she was, facing it consciously, and talking about like, oh, we were watching some documentary about some, ancient emperor of China, and all the things that guy had built, and the people who were, his followers and the citizens of his empire, and what they had built, and particularly like the tomb where it's like a remembrance of him and his dynasty and all that, and it's from the unification of China, I believe. My mom saw that, and she was kind of like, I look at stuff like this, and I listen to it, and it's like, wow, like all the things that this person did with their life, they're, leaving behind, and, their legacy and all that. And then, I look at myself and I go, like, what have I actually done with my life that, would be of any worth or value? And then she says that, she said that, like, but, I think to myself that, I had these two beautiful children, referring to myself and my sister, and like, kind of like that's enough. Like I did enough that I'm proud of that, or I'm happy with that, that I did that. And, there's that, deal there. It just kind of like hits you like your mother's dying, and you're like half of the reason why she feels like her life was worth something. And, processing that, and then having to deal with the fact that, my dad wants to basically deny that there was anything they could have done to prevent things ending up like this, and wanting to go, oh, the doctor said this or the doctor said that, or and I go and I read all these articles, these scientific journal entries and whatnot, articles of talking about the relationship between alcoholism and pancreatic cancer, and I'm of the opinion that it played a large role in this developing. I don't know if there's conclusive evidence. Maybe somebody could come at me with a stack of, all the evidence that, conclusively points in the complete opposite direction. But even then, I'd still say, okay, my follow-up, is, and sort of expanding on my interpretation of the relationship between the two, is that, given that it leads to acute and eventually chronic pancreatitis, which is, a huge risk factor, can, develop into pancreatic cancer, I lean in the direction that it, primarily did come from that. But even if somebody could prove that was completely not the case, the fact is that she couldn't get treatment because of all the pre-existing health conditions that she had from the alcoholism, which ultimately means that however you slice it, whatever angle, primary cause, secondary, tertiary, incidental, whatever, the alcoholism is ultimately what is killing my mom. And, it will be the cause of her death once she passes, and I'm having to accept the fact that she is going to be gone. This is the sum total of it, and there's no resolution. There's all this unfinished business. There's no, let's sit down and discuss this and talk about our feelings and our perspectives and so on and so forth. There's none of that. I just moved the phone a bit because I thought that the speaker was covered up too much. I don't know how great, this all. I know this is an iPhone, I think 11 or 13 or something like that. In terms of like the sound pickup. It's probably good enough, but and my dad and even my sister wanted to argue back that, oh, the doctor said this had nothing to do with it, and it's just like I want to scream at them all sorts of like expletives and slurs and all that, because it's always like when stuff happens to them, it's got to be this Scooby-Doo mystery. We would never have guessed this was going to happen, and we're not taking any responsibility. It's dropped out of the sky, out of nowhere. We're victims, that whole victimhood mentality. And they want to go into this mode, and I know it's part of the denial. It's part of the denial, or part of the bargaining, or whatever. These 5 or 6 stages of grief. It's part of that whole process, and they are at that point. But then it kind of spills over into like the fact that you see like I can't believe I have to or I feel this need to have to sort of reiterate this. I do love my mother. It wouldn't hurt me so much. I wouldn't feel the need to make a video talking about my feelings on it if I was completely apathetic to, what is happening with her and what will ultimately happen with her. But I have to also, and, I'm looking at this partially in response to their denial. But, there's the fact that the actions they took when it came to the alcohol, and in my dad and sister's case, like chain smoking, and then all across the board, the substance abuse with abusing prescription medications. And I mean, there was some downright maybe this is my opinion, or from the sounds of it, some downright illegal stuff going on that happened with, prescription medications, and then, people sharing their prescriptions, or, mixing it with alcohol, or this, that, and the other. That, the fallout from that, it screwed up my life. Because I'm their son. Like, I'm their son, I'm part of the family, and I was living there at the time, trying to get through all these undergraduate classes and get transferred out to some university, and get my life turned around after this, fallout from, the my first attempt at getting out there. Um, and it damaged my sister's life. My mom, a lot of things she did, she betrayed people's trust, robbed people of their savings, or in the family at least, like if you save up, money in a jar somewhere, piggy bank or whatever, and somebody goes and breaks that open and takes the cash so they can go and buy booze, or, breaking my dad's trust by taking the bank card and overdrawing the bank account so she could buy alcohol. The list goes on. It's too much to really contain in any one video. It would take a lot for me to just, drag out the memories. And besides, like, I think half is, it almost feels like part of me is just so burnt out that it's sort of like I've had to record over, so much, and I can't remember a lot of it in its entirety. I can remember certain key moments. I think I can remember mostly like the emotional state that I was in as a result of these events. And if you were to ask about specific details, certain ones jump out at me. Maybe because they're, I just remember them because they're sort of defining of that. Okay, like, tell me about some that happened, in the last 10 years that defines the last 10 years. Okay, well, here's one. I maybe can give you a couple others, sort of thing that I can actually remember in detail. Same thing with my sister's behavior. And it's like things that they've done, which has just, like damaged, if not destroyed, people's lives, and held, folks back from getting anywhere in life. Like me in my mid to late 30s. And, the fact that, like, I started off this channel about NoFap, this and that. Well, it's like, why has that been such a problem for me? Why has that aspect of my life not really gone anywhere? Why have I struggled with so many other things? Well, some of it has just been, when you're a 20-something going into 30-something-year-old guy, you're going to approach that with a lot of immaturity, and you're going to have to go through some painful times and to grow and to get your act together and that sort of thing. But then you look at it like, when you're feeling 10 to 15 years behind, and you actually are, and you realize that a lot of it is honestly because of the environment you came from and the decisions that were made by your parents, by your sibling or siblings, where they didn't give a damn how it was affecting you, if it disrupted your life, if it caused you to have all sorts of mental health or physical health issues, as long as they got what they wanted in that moment. And then, the years roll on by, and they keep doing those things. And even if you get away from it, you start healing, you start growing, you start fixing all these problems and issues, and actually getting progress and getting your life together. And they keep doing those things. And then one day, they get these results, or they get that call that tells them that, well, even if the medical professionals don't know, oh, this person was a chain smoker, they were, a raging alcoholic, but they just, say, like, you got this thing, which, you go through the medical literature, and it turns out that, 80-90% of the time, the person who's got it, or has gotten it because they engaged in certain lifestyle behaviors or things that, built up and built up and built up, this toxic, carcinogens in their system, and then now they have cancer, or, that they overate and overate and overate, and now they're, type 2 diabetic. And, by the way, hyperglycemia predisposes you towards all these, forms of cancer, or, whatever it is, specifically. In this case, it's cancer. It could be, so many other things. Like, I think I was reading somewhere or um, watching some video, some doctors said, like, they almost want to consider Alzheimer's diabetes type 3 because it's so heavily associated with hyperglycemia, which, you know, what's that? You have too much blood sugar, too much sugar in your blood, glucose, in other words. And, well, who tends to have that? Well, type 2 diabetics, type 1 diabetics, people with type diabetes. And, obviously, if you got type 1, I mean, that's predominantly genetic. I mean, you get that early onset, you get that as a kid, like, you didn't really have any choice in that. But most people who are diabetic, they're type 2 diabetics, and they may have predispositions towards those. It's type 2 because it's predominantly a lifestyle type thing. Like, okay, you didn't diet properly, you didn't exercise, you lived a certain way, and now that you're 50 pounds, 60 pounds overweight, hyperglycemic, and now you got type 2 diabetes. But it angers the folks because they want to deny that they had anything to do with bringing this about. This is just some like divine curse, dropped out of nowhere. And and it kind of ripples out into the how do those decisions affect their kids. And it doesn't matter, we don't care, like, she's your mother, he's your father, she's your sister, he's your brother, you gotta fall on that sword, jump on that grenade for them because da 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 da. And my dad, this night telling me when he got back from the hospital, he was like, "No, I'm gonna bring her back." And it's like, not wanting to accept things, not want to take responsibility, even after I talked to him multiple times about all this. My sister even wanted to side with him. You gotta understand, Key, and this is his wife of blah 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 years, and it's like, and I even had to yell at him like a couple days ago, like, if you really cared this much, why were you buying her alcohol? Which that's another thing. As much as she went and did that stuff herself, even after everybody stood up, and by everybody I mean my sister and I basically stood up against this because nobody in his family knows about this. They kept this hidden from my mom, from my grandmother, my grandpa. He's been gone for this point over 30 years. But they kept all that stuff hidden from everybody else, and so basically my sister and I standing up against that. And you think about how much time and effort and energy and whatnot you had to waste in order to deal with their problems that they weren't dealing with. And these are years in your 20s or even your 30s where it's the most potential or the most ability to act on your potential, and you're just giving that up because you're in this situation with these folks who you care about, and they use the fact that you care about them to get that out of you. And then you wake up, you're rapidly approaching 40 and your life is a mess. And my sister's trying to remedy that with her fiance, or she's wanting to get married to have kids with all that kind of stuff, and that's her way of exiting. Me, I gotta do everything on my own. I gotta travel light and travel alone, and having to deal with my dad not wanting to sort of like look at reality as it is and truly come to grips with it, take responsibility for the part he played. I know that she was never going to own up to that herself, at least not to my face. And if this was caused by secondhand smoke, if that was a factor, I still think it was the alcohol predominantly. But if it was a factor of secondhand smoke, well, I was never smoking. I've been straight edge pretty much all my life. There's some fuzziness in the early years where, like, okay, somebody could make an argument to one thing or another. That maybe I wasn't at that point, but once I was like fully consciously aware of like things, and I made this conscious decision, and so the starting point, you can kind of like argue one way or another. If you want like a hard starting point, I mean, at this point, straight edge is it's part of a large part of who I am. It's just I just don't do that sort of stuff, and I definitely wasn't engaging in anything that would have exposed my mother to carcinogenic substances are sort of a second-hand, second-hand or third-hand variety. During the years that she would have been starting to develop all of this. That was my father and my sister, and they don't want to own up to their part. And it's just like, okay, like, what do you want me to do at this point? But, having to grapple with that and just like memories of conversations I've had with my mother over the years, including recently, that, have left a mark on me. And, I'm feeling like there's something else I should be saying or wanting to be saying, but, that's kind of where things stand. Even if a miracle were to occur, the reality is that I don't know if they would even appreciate that, and we would really change things over. Like, would they really not go back to trying to repeat the way things were? And I'm also sitting here thinking about all the, the coulda, shoulda, wouldas yet again. It kind of, I go in this cycle where I'm thinking about, like, there are these places, they're out in the desert, they're kind of far away from, most civilization, but these places that I always wanted to go to with my mom. And there are places far up north where I've been living that I wanted to go to with my mom. And just, even the things where it was like there was sort of a focal point of like, I'm into this, I'm interested in this, she's interested in this, or, was. Gotta change my tense. Where it would have been this sort of meeting point where we could have actually like been, mother, son, that sort of thing. And, I think I may have mentioned this in another video, but there were times where, I wanted to, spend time with her and with my dad, and we couldn't go and do anything because of things that she's done in the past, which gave her health problems, and that'll be a whole other video, which basically made her a homebody and an invalid who needed to be taken care of, which is kind of why I think at this point in her life she's gotten with the kind of guy she's gotten with. It's the whole, alpha versus beta deal where, like, okay, she's got this guy who's willing to not only take her bad attitude, but also, her abusive behavior, but who's, really keyed into or skilled at, or conditioned towards, being the, caretaker, provider type. And, that sort of thing, where as opposed to being some supermodel type guy, who's, on the cover of, I don't know, like, the sexiest man alive or whatever issue of, I don't know what that magazine is. That Time? Is that Life? I don't remember. But I wanted to go spend time with my mom and my dad, and we, couldn't, because the excuse was either, we can't come and see you because, mom and I's health is so bad that we can't travel that far, or we can't because we can't step out of the house for 5 minutes because, if we do, your sister will have a fall or something bad will happen to her, and we gotta stay here. So if you were gonna see us, you gotta come here. And then they would kind of follow that up with, oh, and by the way, we need you to do thus and such things for us, and I would eventually, I was like, I'm just not going, and I'm refusing to, and I'm just gonna accept the fact that I'm never gonna really have anything with them the way I would want to. And that would be punctuated by a handful of times where I would get to, but it was always like I would have to deal with my sister's resentment and her hostility because, my dad and my mom, we went out to this lake that my dad and I would usually go fishing at, and then we went to a cafe out there that's right by the lake, and we, spent the day there, and we, stopped out at a donut shop that, with this bakery, they have a branch out there, and we, hung out there for a bit, and this, that, and the other, and Um, get back home, my sister's all mad, like, where the hell have you guys been? You're supposed to be taking care of me, and then just all the slurs I had to deal with from her. At this time, my dad and I went, to that same spot. We went fishing for the day, and it was like, what the hell? You're supposed to be here taking care of me. And it's like, well, you wonder why I gave up on time to spend any time with my folks, because I couldn't. Because if I did want to, and I did make the effort, and we did get to spend time together, I gotta be dealing with my, dirtbag sister being like the way she is, I don't say dirtbag lightly. I mean, she's not on the level of a scumbag cousin, but, she kind of mimics a lot of that behavior just as much as she mimics my mom's bad behavior when my mom, would engage in that kind of behavior. But this is a complicated, dysfunctional family, and, one thing I've said to my grandma is that, it's kind of like I don't want to be part of this family. Not cutting off my grandma, but not want to be part of this, and that, like I haven't really gotten around to explain to my dad why, I had at one point my sister, I had her blocked on my phone, and I was even considered blocking him because, like, I definitely didn't want to have anything to do with her. I didn't want to have a relationship with her. Didn't want any connection. I've been reading up on enough of this stuff. Raised by narcissists, or raised by borderlines, and the whole idea of going no contact or low contact, and they will use these kinds of crises to kind of break through that so they can rope me back in, and it doesn't accomplish anything or do anything good. And I'm sitting here, and it's like thinking like of my mom's final moments and what's all led up to this, and the fact they don't want to take ownership for their part. And I've spent years trying to fight her substance abuse and trying to get her to course correct and get my dad to course correct and my sister to course correct, and eventually I had to sort of accept the fact that I could only do anything really effectively about myself. And yet here I sit and I feel all this sadness and pain because I didn't want this. I wanted my mom to have her road to Damascus moment, and I feel like I've said this a million and one times, where she would see the light and she would turn the corner and it would be in time. Even if it was just like one day, soon enough, or 1 week soon enough, or, if she'd gone 1 week more, one day more, it would have been too late. But then she turned around and, 20 years in the future, we're sitting there and everything's just hunky dory, and we've worked everything out and this and that, and, but that just won't be the case, because that wasn't my decision to make. And I hate that they're trying to like dump all this stuff on me, because it's not really my fight anymore, my problem anymore. My problem is having to grieve and come to terms with and make peace with the fact that, maybe days, maybe weeks, maybe months, probably not that long, my mom's going to be gone. And I ought to make sense of that, and also not get roped into all their problems, because I know they're going to try and pull stuff on me. They're going to try and get me to stay down here, and, oh, you got to get a job, but get a job down here, and you got to work, and you got to get roped into this and that, and paying for this and that, and, mortgage, and, dealing with your sister, and heck, and I think this is one of the reasons why it's almost like I'm glad I'm not married. Maybe it's a hidden benefit of NoFap, or even on the weird side PMO. I don't think PMO is good. I think ultimately it's a net negative. But they were probably trying to get me married, or hooked up with some girl down here, so that I would be like tied down to here, and then they can just like control my life through those means, And I don't want any of that. I want to be, I wanted to be out of here, but at the same time, I didn't want to like be out of here in the sense that my mom would be dead. I wanted to be like, I wanted things differently, but you know what? I'm not going to get to have that. That's not going to be the case. Because again, it wasn't my decision. It was somebody else's. Like, I could only really decide for myself, and and decide how I was going to go about things in my own life and to make for the best. But anyways, that's it for now. Probably gonna head back to the house and then try and maybe get some sleep if I can. And if not, then I'll have to flee the house to the coffee place down in the city and stay there until the crack of dawn and do whatever I'm gonna do, because it's almost like the only coping mechanism available to me is either exercise, which I don't know if I can much do of under these circumstances, or it's studying and basically being like a workaholic about school, which I have a couple classes I'm taking, along with some of them I'm trying to pursue for AWS. But anyways, I'll see you folks around. Thanks for watching and thanks for the support. Bye-bye.